But in order to keep us on schedule, I think we'll begin the public forum. And again, Dr. Bethel is going to be here, right?
As far as I know.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about the public forum. The public forum will begin at 9 o'clock for a maximum of 45 minutes. Individual comments are limited to 2-3 minutes, depending on the amount of speakers. We only have, I believe, 3 people signed up right now, so 3 minutes is fine. And I think we actually are allowing 5 minutes because they have a presentation. If individuals want to share additional information, they may complete a comment card that will be provided to the board and made part of the public record. And again, just so everybody understands, the forum, public forum sign up begins 30 minutes prior to our meeting and this 9 o'clock time. And the sign up closed promptly at 9 o'clock. So the comments will be taken in the order people have actually signed up. If individuals have issues that are not within the jurisdiction of the board, we'll probably let you know that, and staff will be able to direct you to the right people, or be able to maybe step out with you and answer the questions and get you steered the right way. So with that, I'm going to begin the public forum, and the first individuals, I'll call the first 2 up, and you can come right up to the table here. Chris Walker and Ron Swearin, and I think we have some written testimony from Mr. Swearin too that you should have in front of you right now. So good morning, Chris. How about you go first?
Okay. Just bringing you some feedback from the highways and the byways as I ride my lift around different places. Finding that people have a few basic concerns about service and future service. They're concerned about affordability. They're concerned that prices don't go up. I get the comment, "Oh, you're working CAT, yeah." So people feel free to unload. There's a lot of people hurting out there with the current price structure, and they're just concerned that they be able to afford the next round of whatever comes. 2, there's long rides. I'm not just speaking about myself, but there's a lot of people that experience in long rides, and anything we can do within the system or working with city partners or whatever to help make things better as far as ride times. And so that's a lot of what's going on, and just the concern that we don't increase anymore because people are at their bare bones basics right now with what they can afford. So
Thank you, Chris. We do hear that from folks, so thank you for passing that on.
Yeah.
Mr. Swearin?
My name is Ron Swearin, 1543 Southeast Umatilla Street, Portland. I was pretty active in the Columbia River crossing issue, in being opposed to it, and kind of some funny alliances. A lot of people that were pro-transit, but not necessarily for that project, were against it. And then I found a lot of people in Clark County that were pretty favorable just having a vehicle and being able to get where they wanted to in their own personal vehicle, were also against it. But I believe there's a very intelligent way to connect the dots of mass transit, green power and green energy, making mass transit attractive to people, but also providing a more efficient highway connection that would help businesses that are losing money now through I-5 congestion, and also provide shortcuts on our interstate traffic that would appeal to car drivers, to mass transit users, and to alternative transit users. And basically the thing that connects the dots on that is what has been called the Western Arterial Highway. It was analyzed by Southwest Washington Regional Transportation Council, at least to an extent. They analyzed some other crossings. I've been publishing some articles in Oregon Catalyst, and I also had some articles on the Portland Transport blog. Basically, the long and short of it is I think we could have a Western Arterial Highway that would connect from West Union at Highway 26, go under Skyline Ridge, connect to the Rivergate Industrial District, and then connect to Vancouver. And the main advantage is that presently the distance from Vancouver to West Union is about 20 miles if you go down I-5 and then out 26. This route brings it to about 13.5 to 14 miles, and it connects close to the upcoming Metro West Side Trail. So I think there's advantages in every respect. And the way I like to put it is that when you make a shortcut, it benefits all modes. The shortcut, obviously, people are driving, it takes less time, less hassle, but because there is a shortcut, it's more attractive to transit users. They don't have to transfer as much, not as much time spent on the bus, and if it's short enough, then you can attract the people that would be cycling. And this route connects several major centers. The other thing, I'm see I'm running out of time, but as far as it requiring new bridges, I worked as a union carpenter, which is mostly heavy commercial construction, and I could foresee a bridge on the Columbia that could have power generation placed into it, such as turbines, which are now being experimented with in other parts of the country, underwater turbines. And this could be used for electrical generation. I think that buses, no matter what power they'll develop, will probably have an element of electrical power that's part of the power and package. So I think we can all win on a solution like this. And hopefully I'll be able to get it into a little bit more public discussion in the coming years. So.
Thank you. I just want to have clarification on it. So you're saying one new bridge from Vancouver over to US 30? Is that
No, it would be 3 bridges.
Three bridges,
Main
okay.
Channel, Harbor, and Willamette.
Gotcha. All right. Now
But if the components are mass produced, that should keep the cost down off a basic design. Like I said, I worked as a union carpenter for 30 years, I mean, roughly. So we do everything.
Except for the electrical, because I'm a union electrician.
Okay.
I'm just teasing. Yeah, this is good. I like this, Ron. And I've worked on a couple of the bridges on the Willamette, so.
Yeah, if you go to Oregon Catalyst, there's some other articles, and
Yeah.
I will try to explore the energy generating capabilities.
And
The Columbia most times has a sufficient current that underwater turbines, and the underwater turbine design is really coming along. I guess they've just installed some in the East River in New York, but there's
Yes.
other areas in the world where that technology is being developed. And no matter what mode of power buses have, and also I've written some articles on double-decker buses, which are catching on in many cities, there would probably be some electrical component, whether they're natural gas, diesel,
Yeah.
hydrogen, whatever. There's probably going to be also some electrical power component used. So anyway, I think we could all win in this idea of the Western Arterial, and you think it needs to be explored quite a bit further. I asked Metro if they could have a discussion page, and so far they haven't agreed to it, but I think
Okay, well,
maybe
maybe we
that would
can,
be something good to do.
maybe we can work on that.
thank you, Ron.
Possible?
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right, so the last, actually, I guess it's a tandem of folks that are coming up here to present us from Clackamas Community College, Sean Pollock and Adam Moore. And I believe we have a PowerPoint and also a copy of the PowerPoint here in front of us, right? Okay, oh, okay, all right. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Good morning.
Good morning, board members. My name is Sean Pollock. I'm with Clackamas Community College. I work in the president's office. And I'm here with my colleague Adam Moore, and we're going to tell you a little bit about some improvements that we've made to our shuttle program, which, as you know, is a collaboration between our college and TriMet, administered under the JARC grant, Job Access and Reverse Commute program. By way of introduction, Adam Moore is a Hatfield resident fellow with the college. He's most recently worked at OTREC. He's a civil engineer. And we brought him on board because we realized we needed to do a comprehensive transportation assessment and plan for the future. And so these improvements to the shuttle that we're going to tell you about are in that context. And with that, I'll turn it over to Adam.
Good morning, everyone. I want to give you a really quick update on our shuttle system, which is about 3 years old now, and it's undergone some recent improvements that we're pretty proud of, and we just want to let you guys know what's up. As a brief background, our college has 3 campuses in outer Oregon City, in Wilsonville, and on Harmony Road, just outside of Clackamas Town Center. None of those campuses are connected by a direct transit link, and it takes quite a time to get between them unless you have a car. We do believe, of course, that you should not have to have a car to attend any community college, any higher education. And in a school where about 20% of our students have reported they've had transportation issues in the past that have kept them from taking a class, or in fact they've had to drop a class, we see this as a pretty significant issue to provide links between our campuses. With that in mind, we have our shuttle system branded as the CCC Express. It's formerly the Town Center Express. It serves 2 of our campuses, and it serves Clackamas Town Center at the Max Green Line Transit Center right there. So students are able to take the Max or a number of bus lines to get to the transit center and then get to our campuses. Ridership is up. It's been up almost every year, and that's important to note because we have very little, up to now, advertising for the shuttle. So there's a demand there that has basically found the shuttle and started riding it on its own. We've recently started to push a lot more to take the shuttle, but it's pretty impressive to see that ridership up. It's very positively reviewed. Students have revealed in surveys that we've given that they want more. They're indicating that they were unable to take certain classes prior to the shuttle's existence. So it's a very important and very vital link in just a few short years. That's again, like I said, without very much advertising. And on one of these slides here, you can see we have noted that about 30% of our students are actually unaware as of last spring that the shuttle even existed. So we're looking to get the word out a little bit more that our shuttle exists. And we're doing that through a number of ways. Our buses, which you can see a picture of there, are branded now for the very first time. They previously had just a pretty tiny magnet on the side of the door, and that was it. So it was pretty indistinguishable from any other bus of that size on the street. But now we have our big Clackamas Community College banner on the side, very distinctive. And for the very first time, we have ADA compliant buses. We're pretty happy about that. That's just as of this fall, so just a few weeks now. We're working on putting up new signs. 2 of our 2 campuses that the shuttle serves did not have any signage indicating where the bus stopped. So 2/3 of our bus stops had no signs. We've put up some new signs now that have information about where the shuttle actually travels, as well as information about phone lines and internet access, things where they can get more information. And we're putting up some brand new signs, these brand new signs that you can see in the presentation, at Town Center sometime this week or next. So we're pretty excited about that for directing students around. Just a really quick thing, I want to point out that our campuses are pretty rural, at least 2 of them are. And for that reason, driver ridership is pretty high, drive alone mode choice, I mean. But we're looking to increase our shuttle percentage as well as TriMet rideshare. And finally, just real quick to talk about some future work that we have coming up. We're adding bike racks to our shuttles, the front of them just the same as on TriMet buses. That should happen real soon. Pushing advertising and information access through our website, which is being revamped with the shuttle in mind, so that we can really get the word out that this is an option. We're increasing our headways and our service hours, and we're very eager to add more routes to the shuttle, meaning access to our 3rd campus in Wilsonville, which is very difficult to get to from our other 2 campuses unless you drive. And we'd love to see some access down to Oregon City Transit Center as well, since a lot of our population travels through that transit center. And with that in mind, we have a lot of partnerships that we'd like to pursue, and most importantly, long-term funding solutions, specifically because our JARC grant will expire in the spring of 16. So we need to have that funds over 50% of the shuttle, so we need to be keeping that in mind as we get close to that point. And that's our update.
Good presentation. I bet you have some questions and/or comments from folks.
I just have a comment. I didn't know you had 3 campuses. That's great. That's great.
I got a question. What's the population? How many people in all 3 campuses?
Well, we
full
have a-
and/or /
Sure, we have an
part-time?
undifferentiated head count of about 30,000.
30,000.
That translates to about 8,500 to 8,600 full-time equivalency.
Okay.
So, as you know, community colleges serve really an army of part-time students.
Yep. Okay.
Do you charge fares, or does access come with a student card?
It's free for the public, actually. Anyone can ride it.
So anyone can ride, okay, because that was going to be my next question, is
Yeah.
if it's only students, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But there's been some confusion among our students, and I chalk this up to a lack of advertising on our part and a lack of information. But there's been some confusion for students about whether or not they can bring their children on. Let's say they know it's free for them, the students, but we're really pushing that anyone can ride it. With the caveat that we don't want to push it too much that anyone can ride it, because our buses hold 14 people and we do fill up.
Mhm.
So, as we think about, current, future, and future development in regards to, Clackamas Community College, like, as you reference, its geography is more rural in current locations. What types of things as an agency and as an organization can we do to assist or maybe encourage more as Clackamas Community College continues to develop? What are things that we can do to encourage more alignment with our current systems? I think that when I think about transit and I think about the partnerships we make, there's a certain level of capital of investment that we make that certainly begins to, in a private sector, since the private sector tries to align with what the current systems are. And I know we can't always do that, and there's some legacy geography and location issues that exist. But what are some of the things that we can do to assist in ensuring future campus locations can be more in line with the current system and infrastructure?
I would say two things. One is simply knowledge. We've been collaborating with TriMet since I started in April, and that's been extremely helpful to access that knowledge bank that you all have. And the second thing would be connections. We are happy to provide our shuttle service between our campuses and between Town Center, but we would love to see more connections to TriMet lines in other places like Oregon City Transit Center or let's say the new Orange Line when it opens up, to be able to advertise that we can quickly transfer students between a TriMet line and a CCC line smoothly and efficiently.
Well, just a quick follow-up question on that one. In regards to, the for any transit system, not just TriMet, but any transit system, the moment you've got to have these additional connections to reach an end location or wherever in your journey is, creates complexity and additional time. When I think about the new Orange Line, I think about, if there's a CCC, campus right at the end of the Orange Line, just outside of Milwaukee. That's a benefit for both your students and a benefit for the community in that we reduce the traffic on the road and all those things. Because one of the things that was startling to me, along with the students, I'm trying to look at the graph. I think it was the last one. Was the dearth of faculty and staff that actually take TriMet.
Absolutely.
You think about not just the students, but also the workforce having access to a campus. So it's thinking along those lines. How can we work better together to ensure that potential future development, more aligns with infrastructure and investments that have already been made?
And that's something that we struggle with, being a rural campus that was built in the 60s and the 70s. It's very, very much set up for auto access, and that's it. And that goes for not just transit, but for biking and walking and anything else as well.
Certainly.
We struggle with that, and we are looking for ways to efficiently retrofit our infrastructure in such a way that we can really, and we do recognize that the transfers, you lose a lot of people when you have a transfer. But I would say this is up till now, this is as good as we have gotten, and we've learned a lot in the past 3 years over how the shuttle operates and things like that. So we're making progress.
Excellent, thank you.
Excellent. Great. If I can follow up on Travis's question, have you, TriMet has been working over the last couple of years on what we call service improvement plans, and it's by sub-region. Have you been involved in the Southeast service and enhancement planning process, and do you see a way that what we're doing through that process and what you're doing with the shuttle, we can get more bang for the buck for both of us?
We've been in touch with Steve Kautz, letting him know that we are interested in voicing our opinions, our needs, rather, for what can be done in the southeast. A lot of what we tend to recommend are things like increased headways for the bus lines that already serve our Oregon City campus, and I'm focusing specifically on Oregon City here. That's our biggest and main campus. The other two obviously have their own needs, but we do recognize that you can't necessarily add a whole new bus line. You know, it would be great if we could get a bus line coming from Estacada straight to Oregon City, something like that. But I don't necessarily see that happening quite as feasibly and realistically as getting a couple extra buses on the 33 line or something like that, to get students a little more flexibility in when they arrive for their classes.
Okay, great. I really would hope that, we would be able to work more closely with the college and
Question, and just to note on that, and I'll comment on this a little bit, the new service plan that was just released for the Portland Milwaukee, I think also offers some really terrific service improvements that will be of assistance to the college as well as the rest of the community too.
Great.
I'll note some of that later.
I would agree with that. We're very happy with the improvements that are being made.
Would you know if the community colleges talk to each other when they silos and all that, but when the location of a campus?
They do.
That might be a question not in your wheelhouse, but
They do talk to each other through organizations like the Oregon Community Colleges Association,
Okay.
especially at the president and board levels.
okay.
And there are also interest groups throughout the state from each of the community colleges.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of an interest group that works on transportation issues specifically, although I think, particularly for the Portland metro area, there'd be enough interest in doing something like that. Adam and we frequently talk with our counterparts, I guess,
Yeah.
at PCC and Chemeketa.
Yeah. That would be probably a good conversation.
It's
So-
been helpful. I go over to PCC once in a while and I bug them, and it's been helpful to learn about their shuttle system and how they operate it.
Especially with the population's going to change, and it won't be. You don't want to end up with empty buildings in 10 years. So.
That doesn't seem to be an issue right now,
Now.
but
right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of this can be answered and we can make improvements by better communication and collaboration between TriMet and any of the colleges with regard to scheduling, particularly with regard to course scheduling. And
Yes.
course scheduling is a very tricky thing to accomplish at any college. But we're hearing of anecdotally, and we're starting to collect more data on mismatches between when our classes start and end and when TriMet service is available, or even when our shuttle is available, and that's something that we actually have direct control over. So there's more work to be done there.
Can I? Please. Because of all this complexity of the core classes and start times, can I take a course at 82nd in division at the Southeast campus, and then go over to Clackamas campus to take another course that still builds towards an AA?
That's why we've added the Harmony campus route. I think you're referring to the Harmony campus on 80.
No, I'm
Oh,
talking
you're talking about
the
PCC?
yeah, the brand new one.
Okay,
or
the brand new
expansion
PCC.
out there.
So you can
straight down the street.
You
more
can
or
take a
less.
line straight down 82nd
Okay.
to either Harmony and pick up our shuttle, or to Town Center and pick up the shuttle.
And you still get the same credits, go to the same.
That's right,
Same
yeah.
pot. Okay.
Yeah, so all the credits are transferable, and we have
Reciprocity transferable.
many students who take classes at multiple campuses.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming. You've got a great program. Look forward to working with you and understanding how maybe we can move forward in the future, because obviously these kind of small shuttles really work well for that last mile, and it's not just for community colleges, it's for other businesses. And I think we've got some great partnerships going, and I think this is a wonderful example of one. So thanks for coming. This was very informative, and I think I need to ride it one of these stages to see how it works. So thank you again.
Thanks very much.
Thank you
You
very
bet.
much.
All right, so that concludes our public forum this morning. What I'm going to do now is call the regular business meeting of the Tri-County Metropolitan District of Oregon Board of Directors meeting for October 22nd, 2014 to order. And we'll go right into the regular agenda. The first part of the agenda is the board reports. And the first on the agenda is the Committee on Accessible Transportation. Dr. Bethel.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. You have before you already a summary of the CAT meeting highlights from a previous meeting. The other thing that we need to note that there is not a November meeting, and the reason the executive committee chose not to have a November meeting was so that they can tour the new Center Street facilities. So they will be out there, ADA. I am very, very pleased. This is not in relation to the committee's work, but it is certainly in relations to Expo and the APTA conference, to see the many different things that are being done across the nation and the world as to how they began to deal with the ADA concepts, as well as the equipment that's being used to transport individuals who need that service. So that was greatly a great eye-opener to listen to those and help me be more understanding when I'm sitting in the CAT meetings as to the issues that they're being confronted with. So that concludes my CAT report at this time. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
I don't see any questions right at the moment. Thank you. Would you like to keep the floor and go on to the TriMet Accountability Committee?
With our TAC, and the TAC has been launched. It is up and running. We hopefully in the next several months we'll have some more information back to you as a board, as Board Member Prosser requested that we report back at a more timely interval than an annual interval, so we will be doing that. And so far as we know, it is working pretty good. And we were ahead of schedule as what the Secretary of State's audit required of us, so we're glad that the TAC Committee has been doing that. We will be meeting again, I think this week, next week, pretty soon, and then we will be deciding whether we will continue to meet monthly or we will be meeting bi-monthly or quarterly, just to keep tabs and check up on the process of what's happening with the TAC.
Good.
Any questions?
First, I want to thank you for your leadership on that and getting that moving. It's a great effort, and I look forward to the full report when it comes.
Thank you.
All right, let's go on to the Transportation Equity Advisory Committee, or as we call it, TEAC. Director Zaragoza.
Yes, I wasn't able to attend the meeting, but it's always great to have the report. There was welcomed another member from the Multnomah Youth Commission, Andriana Rangel Ponce. And I must say, these young people, when they come to the meetings, they're very vocal and have a lot of great input. There was also discussion about the equity lens and how that applies to TriMet and how that will be used going forward in the development process. I'm having a hard time talking this morning. Not that coffee hasn't kicked in yet. Planning and Policy had provided a draft service plan, guidelines for the committee's review, and the committee members had several comments and about the guidelines, and we'll look at these more in depth in the future. There were also other items around coming down for TEAC to look at, which will include Title VI equity analysis of the transfer window ordinance, PMLR bus service plan, and the e-fare migration. TEAC will also review analysis and be involved in determining any mitigation strategies if necessary.
Good.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Report? Thank you very much. Then let's move on. We're moving right through them. Oh, I'm sorry. Go
I
ahead.
just want to say, as a youth, I wasn't vocal.
I don't know if I believe that.
All right. Let's hear a report on the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, MPAC. Director Prosser.
Okay, MPAC has been primarily focused this fall on the Climate Smart Communities project and the Urban Growth Management Plan, so have a little bit of report on both of those. By the end of this year, MPAC, the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, known as JPAC, and Metro Council need to adopt a preferred approach for meeting the state-mandated greenhouse gas target of a 20% reduction per capita. And that would target will be reduction by 2035. The draft of a preferred approach is currently out for public comment through the end of this month. And the preferred approach at this point really does focus very heavily on increased transit operations and capital investments beyond what we've already, are currently planned. And there's a variety of other very important recommendations and approaches. So really encourage people to take a look at that and, as I say, submit comments to Metro through October 30th. And on November 7th, MPAC and JPAC will have its third joint meeting to consider public comment received and provide direction to the council. So this is a chance for the two advisory committees, which are the primary advisory committees for the Metro Council, to get together and talk about the preferred approach and make a recommendation to the Metro Council. And then also in November, MPAC will be asked to make a recommendation to the Metro Council to accept the 2014 Urban Growth Report, which is something that is required every so many years. I'm blanking right now on the exact interval there, but this is the report that really guides future growth in the metropolitan area. So it includes population projections, growth projections, buildable land inventories, industrial land inventories, and it really does set the framework for what's going to be happening in the region over the next several years from residential growth and employment growth. So a very important document. And so we are working through that with a goal to make a report to MPAC by the end of the year. So that's what's happening at MPAC.
A lot happening. Is there any questions or comments from the board on the impact report? Well, Director Prosser, you want to keep going? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey, Craig, did you send me that information when the joint meeting is an impact and JPAC?
Yeah, it's November 7th. Can't remember if it's the morning or the afternoon.
It's in the morning. We can get the information to you directly, though.
And it'll be up at the World Forestry Center.
I'll let Kelly.
I'm getting involved in the Portland Comprehensive Plan and just want to see
Yeah.
things.
Okay.
Moving on to the Finance and Audit Committee.
Okay, the Finance and Audit Committee met this morning. We had a report from our internal auditor, Darlene Gastineau, on the work that she and her staff have done over this last year on internal audits. And so just briefly list the audits that she reported on. First was on lift accidents and incidents audit. There was a follow-up to an earlier audit to make sure that corrective action had been taken. The mobile ticketing accounting controls preliminary review. So this is the smartphone app. And there was a preliminary review and a limited review. So there was two actual reviews on that. Rail stores audit follow-up review, and so this is the inventory for repairs for light rail vehicles. A review of absenteeism not resulting from Family Medical Leave Act or workers' comp, and looking at the absenteeism, sick leave usage, and vacation time and how that is managed and what the level of that is. And then there was also a overtime review. There were several other audits that they did, but we ran out of time in terms of reporting, but we did get summary material on those. The second thing we covered was really our first discussion of the FY16 budget direction. So it's that time of year again. And we got a preliminary schedule for the budget timeline. It really will kick off in January. In our January 28th meeting, the board will have a discussion about direction that we want to see the budget take this year. We talked quite a bit. This is will be the first budget that we do under our strategic finance plan. And as you recall, that does require for staff to bring the financial forecast to us prior to the start of the budget process, which is actually something that they have done on a regular basis. But this will give us, as a board, the opportunity to have input on guidelines, new initiatives, new projects to help shape the budget. The way this will play out is we have 2 more Finance and Audit Committee meetings before January, so it's November and December, and so those 2 committee meetings will really be focused on seeing the preliminary forecast and then talking about options for the budget to set up the discussion with the board on January 28th. And at that time, the board will give feedback to staff about the direction we want to see the budget proceed. So we've got an excellent staff, things move forward well, but this is a slightly different process than we've used in the past, and so we want to be very deliberate about how we move forward and make sure that we do a good job to get this effort off on the right foot. So.
Thank you. It was a very good meeting this morning.
Yes.
It was excellent.
We did get also an update from Neil on some of his report, but he'll be covering that in his section, so I'll let him talk about that.
Any questions for Director Prosser? Not on the agenda is that ends the formal board reports. I don't know whether Director Stovall wanted to comment on the World Series. And
Director Esmond,
it was just one game.
That's what I was expecting him to say. All right, let's move on to the General Manager report. Mr. General Manager, your general comments for us?
Yes, good morning, President Warner, members of the board. Happy to provide.
Director Esmond is very happy what happened yesterday.
And the general manager shall stay neutral and such things. Let me first note that related to the presentation you had on the Clackamas Community Shuttle, as the board president noted, we have a number of those partnerships throughout the region. And one of the challenges that will come up is how do we fund those with the expiration of the JARC program, the Job Access Reverse Commute Grant category was eliminated in the last transportation reauthorization. So obviously, as we see the transportation reauthorization this time, there may be some other opportunities associated with that, or there may be some other partnerships. But we do have some work on our agenda over the next year to really sort of make sure that not only can we sustain these kinds of partnerships, but actually grow them, because there's so many other areas in our region that really need that last mile access. So I just make that comment that there's quite a bit of work ahead for us in that regard. Let me start then more formally with ridership, and I would just note that we continue to see strong growth on our system, and it results directly from the service investments that you have approved in last year. Overall, our ridership for September, weekly ridership was up about 6.7%. That is accounted for directly by our bus ridership, and primarily all bus ridership, but we saw the largest increase is almost 11% related to our frequent service bus network, which is, again, starting last March, you put a major investment in terms of filling in some of the headways during the midday period, as well as continuing to meet some of our peak demand in that regard. So, again, service is definitely producing ridership results, and I think that's a great message for us to see. So overall, again, 6.7% system ridership growth, which is a very healthy level of growth. Turning to MAX, it was essentially flat. We saw it down a little bit on the weekday, but up on the weekend, and that's following recent trends. And West was, for the first time, down actually a little bit. But as you know, for the last few years, it's been showing double-digit ridership increases, so we're seeing some adjustment on that over time. So the other thing that I just wanted to note is this afternoon we'll be unveiling our first Type 5 light rail vehicle out at Ruby Junction. So we'll be rolling it out of the barn. Hopefully we'll test the windshield wipers given the weather of the day. But I think it will be actually a very well-received vehicle. There's a number of new improvements, including better seating with leg rooms, new ADA boarding ramps for our riders that are a little less steep, and There's also some opportunity to provide additional seating for people who have an attendant associated with a mobility device. And we've got a great number of improvements in our cabs that were really the result of conversations and input from our operators in terms of the ergonomics of the operation. So we're really excited about these new vehicles. Again, we have one on property and we have another one showing this week. They will all be here by the end of April. And again, they go through very rigorous testing, not only at the factory, but once they get here. And then we put them into a 1,000-mile break-in period. Hopefully nothing breaks, but a break-in period to make sure nothing breaks before we actually put them into revenue service. And obviously part of that is also a complete safety certification of the vehicle, which has really been ongoing through the whole process. So very excited about that. I also wanted to note that each year the American Public Transit Association, APTA, honors marketing and communications efforts, which what's called an AdWheel Awards. And I wanted to thank particularly Dr. Bethel for being present to actually receive those awards on behalf of TriMet. And actually, we received 2 awards. By way of background, the awards are presented in 5 main categories: print, electronic, campaigns, social media, and special events. And the 2 awards that Dr. Bethel accepted for us were for our TriMet Tickets mobile app, based on its overall design, its clarity, functionality, and ease of use. The second was for our Future of Transit website that we've used to help communicate our service enhancement plans and the status of all of those plans over time. So my thanks to Dr. Bethel for accepting the awards, but my particular thanks to the staff and teams that have been involved in that outstanding work that's rightly recognized by the industry that we're a part of. I also wanted to just note a couple other things. One is we've just released our latest version, not perhaps final, but hopefully pretty close to final, version of the service plan for the Portland-Milwaukee opening in September. And I would note that it has a substantial improvement in both bus service in the southeast quadrant as well as the additional light rail service. What we were able to do is actually take the bus hours that we'll save by having the light rail service cover the main corridor and apply those bus hours to improve local service within the feeder area. So for example, we're able to create a very strong route, we believe, between the town center, Milwaukee, and Oregon City ultimately, as well as provide the 99 service, which will run express from Oregon City through the Selwood area, across the Selwood Bridge when it's available to us, and in through McAdam, and providing a whole other series of connections for express bus riders in Clackamas County, as well as Southeast Portland. Since we've lost the 40, be given what was the 40 bus line that went across the Selwood Bridge, when that became weight restricted, there's been some frankly, lack of service directly to downtown from the Selwood area, so we'll be able to reestablish that as well. So we're excited about the plan. We think it's a good basis, and we're out for final public comment, and we'll bring that to you later for final review and approval as part of the overall service planning for fiscal year 16. Finally, in terms of my comments, I wanted to just give you an update on actions we're taking in response to the retreat discussion, particularly related to fare issues. You might recall that related to the transfer ordinance that has been tabled, we had sent some letters to FTA asking them about the robustness or freshness of the data that was needed to complete a Title VI review. We've given that some time. We haven't heard back from FTA, But what we have done now is to take the next step, and we have in draft form a Title VI analysis that uses existing data. And our intention is, even as soon as this week, is to send that off to FTA and ask them if they have any comments on the analysis. So not on the data, but on a completed analysis. And then what we'll be doing, our intention is to bring that to you at your November meeting. And we're giving on the timeline. We'll obviously connect with TIAC and other special interests as well within that general timeline. That would allow the board, in our view, to bring up the ordinance at your December meeting and have an up or down decision associated with that at that time. We'll continue to sort of look at the rules of order issues associated with untabling and all of that, but that's our current timeline for your advanced consideration of that. And just to note, related to the other issues of fair policy that you discussed at your retreat, we will be packaging those per the direction that we saw for your review and for a Title VI analysis. And now there's, again, timeline associated with, a long timeline associated with consideration of that, what will run through much of next calendar year. So just an update on those two topics and where we are with that. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions before we get into the follow-on comments and reports.
Do you see any question?
Just a statement, Neil. I serve on the task force for the governor's low carbon fuel standards.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe we should be reaching out as an agency to find out what's going on through Margie Hoffman and her staff.
Okay, we'll do that. We actually
So
do
the
have.
impact of, who knows,
Yeah.
of course, but it'll be coming up next year, next February. So.
We'll definitely do that.
Yeah.
I would personally don't have the knowledge, but I actually think Eric Hesse of our staff is following it very closely, so I'll double check and make sure that's the case.
He needs to get a hold of me and get some ideas.
Very good.
It's moving, and it's going to move, and we should be ready for it or get prepared for as much as we can.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much. One comment I would have is I hope FTA actually responds to our work, rather than having us take action and then have them say no, or we don't think you're adequate. So hopefully we'll get some read from them before the December decision is made.
We'll do our best.
All right, thanks so much. All right, so moving on then, are you ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay, you want to introduce the next one?
Yes. I'd like to ask Harry Supporta and Coral Agnew to come up. I'd ask Harry to give you a quick update on some of the incidents that we've had along the light rail system and the status of the investigations and reviews going on with that. And Coral is here to give us an update on the safety education campaign that we'll be undertaking in preparation for the opening of the Orange Line. And this is something that we've always done with the opening of our lines, but we really want to do a particularly good job with the Southeast Portland, North Clackamas County community. So Harry?
Good morning, President Warner and board members. As you know, on October 10th, at about 7:15 p.m., which is a Friday, we had a pedestrian struck fatally at what we call a Z crossing. This is a pedestrian-only crossing located about 160th and Burnside. That investigation continues. The Portland Police Crash Team is leading a large part of that investigation. They have not completed their report yet, and we're still awaiting information from the medical examiner as well. But we're still gathering the pieces, and we will share information regarding that particular investigation when it becomes much more definitive as to what the circumstances were. Also, earlier this year, in August, we had a major mainline derailment, and we conducted a very extensive investigation, hired an outside consultant to help us with that particular circumstance, and we actually learned quite a bit from that mishap and the investigation. As it turns out, the switch that was involved where the train derailed was unique, and there were a number of factors that contributed to the derailment. The operator's actions were actually in line with the existing operating procedures, so we've discounted operator error. What seems to be the circumstance is this was a switch that is it's a number 6 switch, which doesn't mean much to you, but what that really means, it's very tight. And when you navigate through that particular switch, it causes the truck of the train to rotate in such a way, it exerts a lot of lateral force against the rail, and because of the number and frequency of the rail movements in that particular area, that caused excessive wear, and it caused the wheel to climb off of the rail and obviously derail. And because of that, we're now taking a number of actions to prevent a derailment, a similar type of derailment, one of which is educating our workforce a little bit better. But more importantly, we learned that we really need to lubricate that type of switch in the future, and we will be doing that. The other two, it's just unbelievable that we also had 2 other fatalities. But we've also concluded those fatalities. An update was provided to you with one of them, and the unfortunate incident at Gresham City Hall, that one, we've just about wrapped that particular one up. We'll be conducting an internal review, and we'll be sharing more information regarding that incident with you as well. Okay. Which all leads to the need, there's an absolute need for safety education, because there's only so much that TriMet can do, and there is somewhat of a responsibility that the public needs to be engaged in as well. So we've invited Coral to give us an update on our safety education efforts for the Orange Line.
Good morning. My name's Coral Agnew. I work in TriMet's Community Affairs on the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail Project, and I'm working with Harry and his team on educating the public about how to be safe in and around our system. Again, a very, very important piece and also a component of our rail activation committee, and we want to make sure that we get this line ready and open and get the community engaged in having safe behaviors prior to our opening day. So why is this important? So we're putting new infrastructure in within 7.3 miles of our light rail alignment. So what that means is 7.3 miles of new infrastructure for pedestrians, for cyclists, and for autos. Unique to this alignment, similar to the transit mall, is there will be transit ways. So educating the public on the various modes and how to get around this new infrastructure is very important. And how do we engage those communities? So we're outreaching out to various institutions and groups. Schools and universities, we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that in a few slides. Social services, cultural destinations, visitor centers, faith-based institutions, bike and pet advocacy organizations. One of the really great ways that we were able to engage the bike community was partnering with the bridges, Breakfast on the Bridges. And we were able to provide them not only donuts, but good safety information for cyclists as they were heading into downtown. So we were really excited to be able to do those type of partnerships. We'll be looking for similar partnerships on the Orange Line. So we'll also be engaging seniors, as well as people with disabilities, neighborhood and business associations. Also reaching out to our internal groups, so our CAT committee, as well as our Transit Equity Advisory Committee as well. So we're going to be reaching out to as many people as we can and getting people educated about how to be safe in and around our system. Just kind of looking back on some of our previous safety messaging that we have done in the past. The Look Both Ways campaign was done as part of the Interstate Max campaign. And what you see on the far left is a Look Both Ways coaster. We had several bars and restaurants along Interstate Avenue, and we wanted to make sure that people had good, safe information. And really, the Look Both Ways campaign is something that is simple, but yet very, very important. We really want to make sure that people go back to the basics because it's essential to stay safe, look both ways, and always be aware. One of the ways we engaged the kids was Earl Peanut. If any of you are familiar with good old Earl, he is a great squirrel that tells you how to be safe in and around our light rail system. So we use coloring books, activity books, as well as using him in safety presentations. You'll also notice that in addition to the coasters, we had handbills. These were done in both English and Spanish on Interstate. These were something that if you were not a restaurant that served beverages, you had this by the cash registers. We went to neighborhood associations, business associations. Everybody on Interstate got this message of stop and look both ways. We also carried that same similar message over onto the Transit Mall when we were looking at reaching out to people because 5th and 6th Avenues were changing. Not only were they changing for transit, but they were changing for autos as well. So we brought back the coaster idea and we took it out to the bars and the coffee shops. We also had coffee sleeves that had the Look Alive logo on there again, making sure that people are aware that these avenues are changing. But we brought back the handbills to make sure that all the businesses and all the big buildings out in downtown had that information. And one of the unique things is when we're creating these campaigns, we're engaging the community, and the Old Town Chinatown community actually told us that this handbill would not only be helpful in English and Spanish, but please bring it in Chinese as well. And so we were able to provide that information to these communities. In addition to these project-specific type of outreach that we've done, we're also working internally with our marketing group, and we want to make sure the Listen Up campaigns, and so we'll be doing the same with the Orange Line and making sure that people are aware of this new vehicle that's going to be coming through their community. In addition to our internal, we're also reaching out to external safety groups. So Operation Lifesaver is another group that we're going to be engaging. And this is primarily due to the fact that a lot of our alignment runs parallel to heavy rail. And so we want to make sure that we have that information for people and that we stay consistent. And if it's a good message, which their message right now is you see tracks, think trains. And that's a great message for us. Yes.
All of your pieces of information are excellent. But I'm curious, do you know how many total pieces you distributed on the Interstate campaign?
Thousands. Lots. I don't have specific numbers, but definitely we coded every bit. I can tell you right now that every student on Interstate Avenue, as well as every school, was engaged. And so they got not only the handbills, presentations, and rides. So it,
Yeah, you're looking at those, I think they're all excellent pieces, and the amount of outreach that you're describing is amazing. Thank you.
It's pretty intensive. Thank you. So looking at the universities, we're bringing this Orange Line from PSU and OHSU, and then you have the Collaborative Life Science buildings. Universities are going to be a huge committee huge group that we're going to be engaging, and the way that we're going to be doing that is going to be distributing information at student fairs, common areas, and working with our liaisons within these universities, because that Collaborative Life Science building has opened up, and we're already seeing a lot of students coming in and through that area. So we want to make sure that they're safe getting there, not only on transit, but also on bike and as they're walking in and around the area. Businesses, neighborhood associations, we're going to be providing everyone with materials about being safe. The really nice thing is that typically business and neighborhood associations have their fairs and festivals during the summer, right before we're getting ready to open up the Orange Line. So really great opportunities for us to engage these communities. Students, these have been the biggest advocates for us as far as being receptive of our safety messages. There's 17 schools within less than a half-mile radius of the track alignment. 9 of those schools are half a mile. That's over 3,600 students that we're preparing to engage. All the schools that I've talked about will be provided the safety material, and we're developing that as it is right now. What we've seen in the past is a lot of this has been printed material, and talking with our conversations with some of the schools right now, we may have to look at web through their digital newsletters and emails that they'll be sending out. So as the technology is changing, we're changing along with it, and so we're wanting to make sure that we address as many people as we can. schools within less than a half-mile radius. So this is the schools that we feel as though those students are going to be walking across our track alignment in order to get to and from home to school. And we want to make sure that we offer those schools a little bit of extra care. And those schools will be offered in-school presentations as well as safety rides on the Orange Line. So this is something that we've done on Interstate Avenue. And like I mentioned before, in addition to the handbill or the backpack stuffers, we did the in-school presentations, and then we sent it all home with when they went to go ride the train. So it really reinforced those safety messages. And just to tell you just a really quick story on Interstate, I was in my TriMet vest standing on the corner of Lombard and Interstate. And I had a mother who had just dropped her child off at school, getting ready to cross Interstate. She looks over at me in my TriMet vest, and she looks at me. She's like, "I'm looking both ways." She was kind of annoyed. And I looked and I smiled, and I thought, honestly, I go, that is really great, because not only are we engaging the children and getting the children to think about looking both ways, but it's carrying on home. It's getting to the parents and to the families. So I thought that was just a really great way to reinforce that we are doing a good job, and this really is reaching the children. So where are we at right now? So fall of 2014, like I mentioned, we've engaged 22 schools within the alignment, so not just the 17 within a mile. We're meeting with staff, so I'm setting up meetings right now with staff that are within a half-mile radius of these. Winter 2015, we're hoping to launch a safety webpage and material so we can drive these educators and the communities over to our website in order to get the most recent and updated materials. Early 2015 is a quiet zone, and again, like I mentioned, with our partnership with Operation Lifesaver, we're looking at what does this quiet zone mean? Well, this quiet zone means is currently right now those heavy rail trains are blowing their horns at every grade crossing, and it is loud. And so the community expects to hear loud as they're going through the area, but once this quiet zone gets established, it's operator discretion. And so as those heavy rail trains are going through, we're going to be moving into our operator training, and so we're going to be more frequent. So we want people to see the tracks, think the trains, and be always aware of their surroundings. In March of 2015, the bus operator trainings begins, so that whole transit way, the exclusive transit way, is going to become very important to us to keep the autos out of that way. May of 2015, like I mentioned, we're going to be engaging the schools. This is perfect timing because this is an opportunity window for the schools, but it's also a great opportunity before they're out on summer vacation and riding the transit system that they have these tools to stay safe around our lines. June of 2015 is our rail operator training. Again, you're going to start seeing more trains on this system, so getting the community aware and prepared for this training is really essential for us to keep everyone safe. Mid-August 2015, simulated service. I mean, we're going to have trains every 7 minutes coming in either direction. So this is going to be very important for us to make sure people are obeying the signals and aware that the light rail trains are here. And then, of course, as we've already marked our calendars, September 12th, 2015, let's go ride that train.
So if you have any questions, we'd be pleased to answer them.
I just have a comment. This is great. And one of the things, as you were talking, I know Cleveland High School is very close to where some of the students will use that. So I'm thinking because if we have obviously teenagers, and sometimes they're going to pay attention, hopefully more times than not, but it might be a way to get into the school and talk with the students. I know you're talking to teachers, etc. You might want to talk with their student government, because I think that if their student government one-on-one peers, they can do whatever that looks like in that school, and that may be another way to engage the students in terms of paying attention. The other thing is always my question is, what are the culturally specific and language specific communities that live in that area? And I know Spanish is the second largest language that we use in terms of information, but again, I would like to know that and how we're engaging those communities. I think sometimes it's a second thought and it needs to be a first thought, or So that's another thing that I would request. Yeah, thank you.
Are we going to have crossing guards for a while from TriMet at major intersections at the rollout in September?
We haven't identified exactly how we're going to, we're hoping for some sort of safety ambassadors. I know Harry and I have talked.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
So there is a program called Safety Ambassador that others have used, and Coral and I have discussed using a similar concept for the Orange Line. So it's still under discussion. What does that actually look like? We don't know quite yet, but it's still under discussion.
I think, but you're going to schools, correct? I think we should get ATU more involved, the people who actually drive the equipment and who are parents of children, and they can speak as a father or mother and talk to kids about, hey, and the third thing, and I'm sure you like getting micromanaged, but I'm not micromanaging. I wonder if we can do a wraparound, say from March of 15 on the track, on the vehicles which are running back and forth being tested. Something like, hey, this is coming, start to be aware of it. Just ideas.
Actually, we've done something similar to that in the past, where it says test, 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 and trains are running. So definitely, we'll look at that.
I mean, something that stands out to a 7-year-old.
Yes.
At least for a while, for a half hour. But not only the children, but the community at large, that we're trying to do everything we can to put that in front of the.
That's a good. We'll definitely talk about that.
Maybe we could have a gig, a wraparound of a PlayStation on the side, and, they'll look at that, or so. Anyway, just some ideas.
Any other comments or?
Just a quick comment. And as we open up, and I think Carrie, you said it best, as we look at opening up this new line, we certainly want to keep safety at the forefront, especially since we've had a kind of a recent rash of incidences within certainly around Max have been of major concern. I would continue just to implore and encourage us to continue to take a look at safety and how we can innovate and how we can continue to innovate. I mean, we've got a lot of track, and we're going to open up some more. And what are the things that even as board members, we can be more educated on to assist in the process of making sure that we also have eyes towards safety, because it all starts with budgeting, and we were just talking about kicking off the budget process. How do we make sure that it's at the forefront of what our thoughts are as we move forward, so that we can be engaged and deliver whatever assistance and guidance we need and support to do the things we need to do as we move forward. Because certainly, we want to have an incredibly safe system. So, but thank you for all of this. This is, I think, this is some of the reason why we haven't had more incidences. I mean, getting out there, putting this information out there, being focused on talking to the folks in the education is critical, and making sure that we've got a safe system. So thank you for your leadership, Harry, and continue on.
Along the same lines, I will volunteer my time when you go out to schools or something, the public, where I want to be able to show that the board is bought into all this. As Harry knows, and you should probably know by now, the safety comes from the top down. And
Absolutely.
We buy in, we show it that we bought in, and I'll keep my mouth shut when I go there. But I just want to,
we welcome that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think after November 4th, have more time.
All right, thank you. You want to introduce the next item?
So we have a report, a quarterly finance report. I know this is Board Member Prosser's favorite report of the quarter, but it's actually important to sort of, this is again a first quarter report where we begin to see some of the some of the trends and how it affects our budget moving forward. Obviously, early on a lot of those things. And I'm pleased to introduce Dee Brookshire for a chance to do her inaugural quarterly finance report.
Thank you. Good morning, President Warner and members of the board. The report you received on the first quarter reflects results that, while early in the year, are generally good news and reflect a steady financial state for TriMet. Total revenue came in higher than budgeted by $500,000. Total operating expenses were $8.7 million lower than budget, producing a positive net result from operations that's better than budget by $9.2 million. Compared to the same quarter last year, payroll tax grew 1.8%, but was slightly under budget for the quarter. Passenger revenue for fiscal year to date is 2.7% higher than budget, or $800,000. Overall, ridership has increased 6.7%, as Neil noted, compared to the same time period in the prior year. During the first quarter, TriMet received $1.8 million in operating grant revenue, with another $74.1 million expected by the end of the year. Now, I'd like to touch on some of the areas that, just in a higher level version, if you have any specific questions, please stop me. But on the system operating expenses, the system operating expenses for the quarter are 6% under budget, or $6.6 million, with $5.2 million of the variance occurring in the operations division for a variety of reasons. Operating project expenses, including repairs and maintenance to existing infrastructure, are also below budget by $2.2 million at the end of the first quarter. Timing of expenses is one of the primary reasons for the variances at the end of the first quarter. On our general fund debt service activity, try not to get too deep in the weeds on this, so please bring me back up if I start to go there. But at the end of the first quarter, TriMet deposits, including interest earnings to debt service funds, total $6.9 million, and principal and interest payments to bondholders and leaseholders total $13.4 million. The September 30 balance in debt service restricted accounts is $31.1 million. On to the statement of capital contributions and capital expenditures. Total capital expenditures, including light rail program expenditures, are $64.5 million for the fiscal year to date, with expenditures of $46.1 million for the PMLR project alone. TriMet has received the first 3 installments of the full funding grant agreement for the PMLR project, totaling $279.5 million. Just a brief comment on the negative $59.3 million showing on this report, and that's the difference between the capital contributions versus capital expenditures that were paid by bond proceeds. So the statement of net position is the last one I'd like to comment on, and those are, the statement of the net position measures the difference between total assets and deferred outflows and total liabilities and deferred inflow of resources of the agency. So TriMet's total net position at September 30 is $1.7 billion. TriMet's current assets have decreased $103.5 million since June 30th, due largely to the use of funds for the PMLR project and all the associated debt service. With respect to non-current assets, the value of property and equipment increased by $42 million. This is a net effect of $64.5 million in capital acquisitions, offset by $22.2 million in depreciation. Total liabilities have decreased $33.1 million since June 30th. Long-term debt decreased $11.4 million due to debt service payments on bonds in September. OPEB liability has increased $20 million since June, with $450.8 million shown as a non-current liability on the balance sheet. The net pension liability of $182.1 million is a decrease from June 30th of $4.4 million. Current liabilities have decreased $37.9 million since June 30th. The unearned capital project revenue continues to represent a significant portion of current liabilities, and it totals $149.2 million at September 30th. The September investment portfolio report shows $106.5 million of unrestricted cash and investments. So going along with the new financial plan, the guidelines, this is 2.5 times our operating expenses would be 102.9 million. So you can see that we're well within that guideline. The report also shows 168.6 million of investments restricted for the PMLR. And these funds are drawn from the state of Oregon lottery bond proceeds and a portion of the proceeds from the interim financing, which is restricted for use on the Milwaukee project. So that concludes my report. I understand this is the highlight of the meeting, but if you have any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them or take them down and get the information to you.
Question, Mr. President. I'm a little concerned on page 3 where it talks about the increase of the OPEB liability. And I'm correct, Board Members Travis and Prosser, that in our strategic plan, that is being addressed. The OPEB liabilities.
So the reason that the OPEB liability increased was because we changed one of the assumptions regarding the future return on investments. So we reduced that. When you reduce the expected return on investments, then the liability goes up. Now, clearly, if the return is higher than we're assuming, it's going to be a lower liability. We adjust this every year, depending on whatever the projection is. And clearly, the changes contemplated with the labor agreements is going to dramatically change that liability.
And here's to your question in terms of the strategic finance plan. In the strategic finance plan, we acknowledge that the OPEB, other payroll expenses and benefits, is really more of a cost issue that needs to be addressed system-wide. The plan does give priority for funding our pension unfunded liabilities, and then says once that is funded, then we switch that flow of funds over to trust for the OPEB liabilities.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Dee, for the report. As we look at the operations or the statement of revenue expenses, you referenced the difference of the variance of $9.2 million. And as we look at that, there's a little bit of improvement on the revenue side, a significant reduction or a significant lack of expenses in some key areas. Are those things, you also referenced timing, but I think the timing was in regards to some more capital or over on the statement of net position. The largest item here, of course, is the $5 million difference in the operations division. Is that something that we're going to essentially make up over the year? Is that a timing issue, or are these real savings that will continue on throughout the rest of this fiscal year?
Well, that's a good question. We did look into that a little deeper, and what we discovered was that there is some lower costs related to hiring employees at a lower level of lower wage rate than was anticipated when the budget was prepared. So there's that, and that may represent an ongoing. There was also a reduction in the workers' comp rate, which we may or may not experience again. And so there are some deferred maintenance costs, excuse me, that we probably will make up over the year.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Go ahead.
On the maintenance cost, are we myself in the spreadsheet don't speak too well, but myself in maintenance on existing equipment do. So are we looking ahead as the aging infrastructure and having enough resources to quickly, or so we don't have switch 6 types or switch 4 or whatever the heck it is, that we're ahead,
So, an excellent question. And actually, we did do a major ramp up, if you will, of our capital plans last year. And we now, as we discussed with the Finance and Audit Committee meeting this morning, have even more rigor that we want to apply to that as we go forward. Right now, we have a pretty aggressive, I would say, replacement rehabilitation program related to the switches, for example, and other aspects of the system. And what we want to do is really make sure that that we are really very rigorous about that looking forward, and make sure that we've got those expenses in our forecast moving forward as the equipment begins to wear down. I would tell you that related to the rail fleet, we are quite on top of that, and in terms of the bus fleet as well. And your support as a board for the more rapid replacement of our aging bus fleet, I think has made an incredible difference in that regard. And actually, we've seen reliability on that fleet overall increase pretty dramatically over the last year. So, answer to your question is yes, we're focused on that, but also we know that there's still a lot more work and rigor that we can apply to that going forward.
And I'm going to probably answer my own question, but we are getting input for the people in the field.
Absolutely.
You know, so hey, good. Good. There's other people that have to work with that stuff every day. No offense to anybody in suits in here, but they're the people that got to strap on the tools and everything else. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We had to come out of our suits and work too.
Well, I mean, out in the rain. I was coming to work today, and I was thinking, boy, it'd be great to be working outside in the ditch with some pipe. So.
Today is not a good example.
No.
I agree.
Thank you, Neil.
So I guess my comment would just be nice report. I'm glad to see where we are. It's nice to see the fare increases, especially attributable to our frequent service, which means people are using that frequent service, which is very rewarding. And I suspect when we get into one of our later agenda items in terms of our work with the union, we can also look at what's the impact going to be on our OPEB and pension liabilities, which I think is very favorable for both TriMet management and for the union as a whole. So I think we got some good news that we're going to see all around here today. So thanks for your report. Look forward to the next quarterly report. All right, well, let's move on then to the next item on our agenda, which is our consent agenda. And for those watching or in the audience, items on the consent agenda are considered routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. However, any board member may remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion and questions by requesting such action prior to consideration of this portion of the agenda, and we'll then consider it at the end of our normal agenda. I will point out for the record, those of you who don't have the agenda in front of you, there are 5 items on the consent agenda: the approval of the minutes for the September 24th, 2014 meeting, a resolution which it allows us to make changes to our contracting rules, which was carried over from our last meeting to allow some of the board members to have some questions answered. So I think it's appropriate that be on the consent agenda. Another one which authorizes the staff to apply for 8 grants from the Federal Transit Administration for formula and discretionary funds. A resolution authorizing modification to an existing contract with RINC Incorporated for our central control system to deal with the addition of the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail project. And then finally, a resolution which is adding to the scope and contracting authority for a contract with Stacy Whitbeck for the construction of the Ruby Junction Rail Operations Facility Phase 1 expansion. And so, again, that's consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that any members of the board would like to have removed? Seeing none, then, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion or questions? Well, then let's go on. I will call for a question on the motion to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. So let's move on to a couple really good agenda items for the board, which is our number 4 on our item. The first resolution is Resolution 14-10-52, which is authorizing the general manager and the chief negotiator to enter into a new working and wage agreement with Division 757 of the Amalgamated Transit Union. So I'm looking forward to hearing this. So Randy Stedman, you're going to lead this discussion?
I think Neil's going to
Okay, Neil's going to introduce, all right.
So, Mr. Board President, members of the board, I'll do a very quick introduction, and then we'll turn to the experts on the matter, Randy Stedman and Claire Potter, who have been steadfast centers of our negotiating team. But I did want to just mention to you that I'm able to say something I've wanted to say since I took this job, which is I'm able to recommend to you a tentative agreement with ATU Local 757. And I do recommend your ratification of this. I think that's in sort of big picture moves TriMet to a place of financial stability, which is great security for our riders as well as our employees. So I think it is good news as sort of a practical and sensible approach to the current place that we find ourselves. Clearly, this has been a long road. A hard road for both parties, but I think at the end of the day, we have a very good result. And hopefully it will also begin to allow us to set a more positive and engaged tone for the future in terms of our relationship with Local 757. And I want to particularly thank the members of our negotiating team led by Randy, and of course Claire up here is the financial analyst who has been always has to do the hard work of actually finding out what the ideas mean when it comes to actual money. But I also want to thank the members of the negotiating team of Local 757, and particularly President Bruce Hanson for his guidance and work as we went through this whole process. With that, I'll turn it over to Randy to go through some of the key provisions of this agreement, and then obviously with help of Claire, what does that mean for us financially? So if I may turn it to them.
Good morning. Good morning. Claire and I are pleased to be here on behalf of the entire bargaining team to both recommend the tentative agreement that was reached between TriMet and the ATU on September 30th, together with prior agreements on October 24th, 2013 and June 24th, 2014, which together wrap up and resolve all of the outstanding issues between the parties. So we wanted to go through with you some of the key elements of the tentative agreement that was reached. Obviously, in a 160 or so page document, there are some minor issues that we won't cover, but the key issues that were resolved as part of the tentative agreement are contained in this presentation. The first item is the term of the agreement, which is a 4-year agreement that begins December 1st, 2012 and would end on November 30th, 2016. That's compared to the status quo agreement, which was a 3-year agreement. The term of agreements in the past have varied. The prior agreement before the contract imposed by arbitrator Gaba was a 6-year agreement. So this is a 4-year agreement that ends in 2016. Wages are, of course, a key component of the agreement. The wage increases are negotiated wage rates contrasted with the prior contract, which had cost of living increases between a minimum of 3% and 5%. These increases will be 0% for December 1st, 2012, 0% for the 13, and then 3% increases on December 1st, 2014 and 15. In addition to those general wage increases, there is a special increase upon ratification of the agreement by both parties of $1 per hour for journey workers. There are approximately 345 journey workers, and then there's a flow through for those assistant supervisors whose compensation is measured by the journey worker rate. It's 115% of the journey worker rate, so those would be affected by that $1 an hour increase for the journey workers as well. Active employee health care is a key feature of this tentative agreement, and a number of things are happening. The major thing that is happening is that we, along with the ATU, agreed that the core plan would be the 80-20 plan with regents, contrasted with the current 90-10 plan, and that there would be a 5% premium contribution to employees, contrasted with the 0% premium contribution in the current contract. But in addition to that, we're substantially increasing choice for employees. So our contribution to all of the PPO plans is measured by 95% of the 80/20 Regents plan. Employees can choose, however, if they want to keep the current 90/10 plan, they can pay the difference between 95% of the 80/20 plan and the cost of the premium for the 90/10 plan. So that's their option. They have a third option, and that is for choice of a high deductible plan with a health savings account. So TriMet's contribution in that case, because the high deductible plan's premium is less than 95% of the 80/20 plan, they would have a 0% premium contribution, and the balance of TriMet's contribution would go into a health savings account, a plan. So 3 PPO plans, all of which are measured by the 80/20 plan and 95% contribution to that plan by TriMet. In addition, we're retaining the Kaiser plan, but moving to the $10 copay plan instead of the $5 copay plan, and also a 5% contribution toward premium by employees in that plan. On the dental plan, we have increased the benefit to union members by implementing the non-union MOTA plan, which will essentially double the benefit, and we are replacing the Willamette plan that we did offer with a Kaiser plan that many union members had requested because about half of our employees are enrolled in the Kaiser medical plan. So the combination of the MOTA plan is more expensive, the Kaiser plan is less expensive than Willamette, and we think on balance that is a balancing of costs, again, with a 5% contribution to those plans by employees. I've talked about the premium contribution of 5% and how that would work. For part-time operators, for the first time, they will have the same plan design as full-time employees and the same contribution of 5%. In the prior contract, the individual employee paid 0%, but their dependents paid 25%. So this is an enhancement of benefit for the part-time employees. In addition to this, we are making a one-time distribution to ATU members of $425,000 of the $5.5 million in costs that were passed on to employees pursuant to ORS 243756 during the last 2 years. Early in the negotiations, we noted to the ATU that our ask of a 6% at that time premium contribution was actually less than, in many cases, that the costs that were being passed on during the period of time that the contract was being negotiated. As we got down to reaching a tentative agreement, we were looking for ways to bridge the gap, and we again re-offered that we would refund to those employees who had paid during the last 2 years more than 6%, refund the difference, and that turned out to be about $425,000. The ATU will give us instructions as how to disperse that money among their members. For retiree health care, again, there's a significant increase in choice. You'll recall that our promise to the pre-65 retirees is that they will have active health care, and for these folks that are post-65, our promise is that combined with Medicare Part B that's paid by the district, and the supplemental health care plan also paid by the district, that will be the same coverage as our active employees have. Now they'll be able to choose between having that supplemental plan. They'll still have the Medicare Part B paid by the district, and a choice now of having the supplemental plan or having that as a stipend that's put into a retiree health reimbursement account. So there's choice there that they'll have that they didn't have before. And also in 2016, we'll be implementing an 80/20 supplemental plan that has the same sort of coverage when combined with Medicare Care Part B, but it'll be a PPO plan and have a lesser premium cost. So there's some savings for equivalent coverage that they would have otherwise. One of the big changes is for hires that are made on the day following ratification of the agreement, and that is that the new hires, when they retire, so some 10 or more years out, they will have a choice of receiving, they'll have an $800 a month stipend, and that with that stipend they can have a choice to purchase coverage through our plan, or to have that stipend put in a retiree health reimbursement account. And that will increase, that stipend will increase by CPI each year, as will the stipend for pre-65s. But once they reach age 65, they'll no longer have any health coverage through TriMet. There's also the elimination of a side letter in our agreement in 2003, when Kaiser made unilateral changes to the health care plan. TriMet made up the difference in cost, and that letter will be eliminated for the contract. So those folks will have the Kaiser plan that's in effect, and that coverage associated with that plan. Another key feature of this tentative agreement is, for the first time, the district having the discretion to hire from outside to fill maintenance positions. So the district will have the discretion to hire up to 1/2 of each of the apprentice programs from outside the district, and will have the discretion to hire up to 5 journey workers annually from outside the district. There's some additional miscellaneous provisions that were agreed to as part of the tentative agreement. There are 3 funds: the EAP program, the Recreation Trust Fund program, and the Child Elder Assistance program, that have been a source of controversy. I think we've worked out that controversy in this contract. For the balance of this contract, if ratified, the EAP program, we will continue to make $55,000 a year annual payments to an EAP program that is administered by the ATU outside of our program. However, TriMet has, for the non-union employees, an EAP program that actually provides better benefits than does the ATU program. At the end of this contract, and during the hiatus period and going forward, ATU members will be part of the regular TriMet EAP program. Of course, this is a mandatory subject to bargaining, so that could be on the table, but at least during the hiatus period, they will be under the regular TriMet program, and we will not pay that $55,000. For the Recreation Trust Fund, we will continue for the balance of this contract, if ratified, pay $55,000, but thereafter the recreation monies will be budgeted as part of TriMet's general fund budget. And for the Child and Elder Care Assistance Program, we would pay $55,000 annually, but only if the fund is less than $100,000 as of the date it's due. There were some significant streamlining of the grievance process. As you know, we have in the past experienced a large number of grievances. In 2010 and 11, that amounted to about 250 grievances a year. Those were substantially reduced with changes in the last contract to an average about 150 or so grievances a year. With this streamlining, we are eliminating the pre-filing, which was an informal step, and the step 3 panel, and also agreeing to rotate the grievance arbitration panel more frequently than is done in the past. In the prior contract, that panel was in place for the term of the contract, and now we'll rotate that panel at the request of either party every 14 months. Labor management meetings, we have adjusted the labor management meeting construct in the contract so that the parties will meet at any time on any matter of mutual interest to solve problems of mutual interest, rather than having perfunctory committees that specify who attends and how often they'll meet. Now we'll have meetings as is required and ensure that the subject matters from both sides of the table are present in those meetings. We did expand the funeral leave provision to include memorial leaves and expand the number of days from 3 to 4, but those days need to be taken within 120 days of reasonably being notified of the passing of the loved one. So that's an expansion of that benefit. The hours of service, which was a labor management agreed MOU, is now incorporated into the contract. There's no change on that from what the board is already aware of that change for hours of service. We've included a provision for fare inspector training of up to 8 hours annually for diffusing and responding to hostile confrontations. That's a new provision in the contract. And we've made some additional provisions for allowances for uniforms and coats, increasing the uniform allowance to $315 from $215. I'm very pleased to say that this tentative agreement includes the settlement of a number of outstanding pieces of litigation, including 4 ULPs, 2 by TriMet and 2 by the ATU, along with 2 Court of Appeals cases that are now pending with the Oregon Court of Appeals. Those will all be resolved as part of this tentative agreement if ratified by the parties. I wanted to just give you a short example of what is happening to the total premium costs associated with the healthcare plans under this tentative agreement. In that 2014 column, those are the current plans and rates. So just looking at the first row for Regents single employee as an example, the current premium, total premium is $834. Because of a decline in utilization the past 2 years, over 5% this last year and 3% the prior year, even under the 90-10 plan, as employees have become more informed consumers of health care due to paying some of the out-of-pocket costs and the pass-on costs under the statute, the utilization has dropped quite dramatically, and the premiums are dropping for 2015 for that plan from $834 to $791 a month. But you can also see with the 80-20 plan, the premium cost is lower still at $745. And then the high deductible plan with the HSA that we're implementing, if this contract is ratified, has a premium cost of $599. And then in the far right-hand column, the contribution that TriMet would make to the HSA accounts is $108. And so on down the line for Regents. Kaiser, the $5 copay for 2014 is $660. The $10 copay is slightly more. Unlike the Regents plan, where we implemented a 90-10 plan and I think had more informed consumers of health care, the Kaiser rates have still gone up a bit, relatively speaking, although also compared to Regents, it is a better bargain overall still. For dental, as I mentioned, for MOTA, we're increasing the plan from a benefit of $1,000 to $2,000. The premium, of course, is higher for that sort of benefit, so that's going up. But the Kaiser plan at $36 a month is less than what the Willamette rate was. So again, on balance, I think we've got those costs at balance, and with a 5% contribution by employees. So with that being the elements, those translate into financial effects and impacts for the district going forward, and Claire is here to talk about what those impacts are.
The tentative agreement results in a sustainable financial forecast that is in alignment with the strategic financial plan if historical rates of revenue growth continue. So what we're showing on these 2 slides are 2 forecasts. One, a forecast of the status quo, SQ, revenues and expenditures, and that is the current contract terms going forward. And the slide on the right-hand side are the financial results of the tentative agreement going forward. Both forecasts, the underlying assumptions, economic, ridership, fare, service, capital, pension, and OPEB trust funding assumptions are the same. So what you're looking at here are just the differences between the wages and ATU wages and benefits of the current contract going forward and the tentative agreement going forward. I want to mention that the status quo was the ATU's initial proposal walking into labor negotiations. The next slide is basically showing the same information on the previous slide, but in a different format. The bars show the differences between revenues and expenditures for the status quo and for the tentative agreement. The little numbers on below the bars or on top of the bars show the months of operating expense in beginning unrestricted fund balance. So this is a key indicator in the strategic finance plan. And what the numbers on the right-hand side of the graph, the tentative agreement shows that we meet the board goal of 2.5 months of beginning of operating expense and beginning unrestricted fund balance throughout the forecast. There is way at the end of the forecast, starting around 2027, when we replace the light rail vehicles, we are beginning to see a little bit of a off. We're a little bit off there, but it's still within solvable range. By the time we come back to you in December with the updated financial forecast, that should be solved. This graph shows the historical status quo and tentative agreement active and retiree medical expense paid by TriMet. Comparing the red line, which is the status quo, and the blue line, which is the tentative agreement, you can see that the tentative agreement bends the cost curve favorably, although costs increase over time. The actuals between fiscal 1999 and 2012, the average annual growth rate per active and retired employees was 8.1%, and that's shown on the left-hand side of the graph. That's 8.1%, and we chose 2012 because that's when we started to bend the cost curve down with the GABA arbitration decision. On the right-hand side, the average annual growth rate per active and retired employees between 2012 and 2030 under the status quo is 4.8%, and the tentative agreement is 3.7%. The upward slope reflects additional retirees in these years. The next slide shows OPEB, or other post-employment benefits, expense for union retiree medical status quo versus the tentative agreement through 2043. These projections were prepared for us by Milliman in May of 2014, and then they were updated for the changes that we made during negotiations in October. The red line shows the benefits payments for the status quo, and the blue line shows the benefits payments projected for the tentative agreement. So you can see how that line is flattening out over time, and the huge difference in costs there. The next slide shows the impact of the proposed union retiree medical benefits on the OPEB valuation and payouts. Under the status quo, the present value of benefits is $1.392 billion. And the numbers that I'm quoting here are just for the union side of the OPEB liability. The total unfunded liability is $950 million, but we're just comparing the status quo and the tentative agreement union numbers. The present value of benefits under the tentative agreement is $1.024 billion. That's a reduction of $368 million over 30 years. The actuarial accrued liability under the status quo is $869 million. Under the tentative agreement is $641 million. It's been reduced 26%. The normal cost under the status quo is $48 million. The normal cost is the cost of benefits earned each year. The normal cost under the tentative agreement is $35 million or $13 million lower. The amortization of the unfunded liability under the status quo is $40 million. Under the tentative agreement, that drops to $29.5 million. Most importantly, the benefits payments themselves, the 30-year payouts under the status quo were projected by Milliman to be $2.1 billion. The 30-year payouts projected by Milliman for the tentative agreement are $1.3 billion. They've been reduced 37%. Under the status quo, the benefits payments are not affordable, and what we've achieved under the tentative agreement is going forward, we're going to be able to afford the promised benefit. Under the tentative agreement, in addition, by making the changes to new hires, we've avoided $375 million in costs not included in the actuarial valuation.
So again, your bargaining team is comprised of those members of the district, and we recommend ratification of this. I think it's important to note that while we have made substantial progress here, our costs do still go up over time. But we have bent the cost curve down to a level that's manageable and under the normal give and take of labor relations going forward. So we're pleased that we were able to reach agreement with the ATU on this tentative agreement.
We're pleased too. Thank you. Before I forget, I want to make sure anybody in the audience, anybody watching this understands, the board has had a number of individual sessions, so we've had a lot of time looking at the information that was presented here today in summary. So I think we're well prepared and understand the contract proposal that's before us. So what I'm thinking is, why don't we get a motion on the floor to approve this resolution, then we'll get in some comments and questions, okay? So I'd say, first off, is there a motion to approve Resolution 14-10-52? I hear a motion.
Second.
I hear a second. Okay, so let's talk about there. So first off, is there any questions or comments for staff? And then I think I'd like to maybe hear about where people think we need to go. So
I just got one quick clarification question. Randy, in your presentation, you referenced the ratification of the agreement being the start point where new hires actually would not be eligible for the future retiree benefits.
Day after ratification.
So the day after ratification, not the date of the current contract, which was effectively 2 years ago.
That's correct.
Okay.
And what is the expected timeline for union ratification?
The union ballots are out and being returned. We understand that they're going to be counted this Friday on the 24th, and so I would expect to hear something by the end of the day Friday.
other questions? I think what you're seeing here is, again, the board has spent quite a bit of time on this and is very pleased with what you have. So I think maybe we ought to just talk a little bit about where we are on this before we actually take a formal vote, because I think it deserves some acknowledgement and maybe some comments by the board. Anybody want to start down there? You want to start?
Yeah, I'm very pleased, very thankful to TriMet's bargaining team, but I'm also very thankful to ATU and under the leadership of Bruce Hanson. I think this is a really good example that even when you have very strong opinions and very firmly held positions, people of goodwill can come together with a good result. This is, in my opinion, this is a good agreement for TriMet. It's a good agreement for ATU, and the bottom line means that this is a good agreement for the region. And I appreciate all of the hard work that both sides put in to come to this conclusion. So thank you.
Thank you.
I certainly second what Director Prosser has just referenced. I mean, there's a lot of folks who have been focused on coming to this agreement. And I certainly also want to thank Bob Tackett over at Northwest Labor Council. He's also been a person kind of instrumental in bringing us together and giving us an opportunity to have further conversation. I would like to say that ultimately, as we look at something like this, and knowing that we had gone through some arbitration and some other mechanisms, I would call them, to try and get to an agreement for two sides to come together and actually develop a tentative agreement, is something that sends at least myself a clear picture or a clear statement that we want to move forward. And that's something that's incredibly positive, knowing just the recent past history of as we've moved forward, the items and the actions that have been taken, and a little bit of the contentiousness that's been over the previous negotiation. So being here today is a tremendous step, I believe, in the right direction. We still have a lot of work to do on both sides to build the relationships and continue to work towards the mutual outcomes that are going to make this a very sustainable long-term system for this community and the stakeholders that exist. I also want to thank the international folks of the ATU and their efforts and input as we've gone through this process. They were able to give us a tremendous opportunity to kind of see what other folks are doing and give their input on this. So this is again a tremendous milestone for the ATU, for this organization, but primarily for the stakeholders of this community and the users of our system. So I'm proud to be a part of a process that we can move forward like this, and proud to be a part of this board and the leadership that President Warner provides and the rest of the board members on these key issues. So thank everyone for all of their hard work, and I'm very supportive of this outcome.
Thank you. I too, this has been a long haul, and I especially the support of our employees, that they actually have now a tentative agreement, and we'll see what happens Friday. It's been a long haul. Everyone's worked really hard. I think that this is just really great, and I look forward to see what happens in the next steps.
Thank you. I borrow the words of a fellow TriMet employee who says, kudos to you those. Thanks so much for what you have done and been able to accomplish with ATU, for everyone that has been a part of this, but I think more importantly, to say to TriMet employees, those bus operators, rail operators, and others, what a great job you are doing, and we trust that you will come to understand and know that this board has very well been concerned about the contract and hoping that we could reach the point that we have reached today of a tentative agreement. As I overview it, all of the figures seem very reasonable, and they're more manageable today, and that makes me happy because in years to come, when these retirees and others are looking for benefits, there will be something there that won't be something that is so dependent upon a lack of funding and the question continually, how are we going to fund it, and yet still demanding more and more, that the curve and the cost will come down, even though as time goes on, those costs will go up based on employees and retirees and all of that. What a great, wonderful, fantastic job as a team you have done. And I know it's tentative now. I believe on Friday it's going to be permanent. And so I just want you on Saturday to have a nice dinner. And then when you come back on Monday, get the team together. Let's get this thing done ahead of time for the next time the contract comes up. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot. On both sides. At one time, I did this more. We did it in this building for about a year. I was the head of the unions here at the city, and it's very hard. And, I think everybody came out okay. We got a fair contract for everyone concerned. Not only just the two parties, but the people in this region that we serve and are watching this. And yeah, if I had some beer here, I'd be giving you beers. But I'm sure there was some kind of herb rule or peb rule that prohibits that. But and not just for your team, but for Bruce over there and his team. I know when a TA is signed by the unions, that means the leadership have decided That is the best interest, and well, best they can do, maybe, and in the best interest of everybody. And it's hard to get there sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you. Please. I certainly do want to give some great thanks to our general manager, because at the top of this, without you being able to see, to understand and give support and give some latitude for the team to do some negotiation, we more than likely would not be here. We could have a standoff. So kudos to you those as well for what you have done.
And to the board, too. Thank you very much for your support. Director Stovall mentioned the great work that John Costa from the ATU International did, and he was certainly a critical factor in this. But I'd also like to recognize the state conciliator, Janet Gilman, who did a marvelous job with these mediation sessions, and she's had a great year involved with some of the other mediated settlements, and she does a fine job for the state. Thank you. Thanks to her.
And I guess I would just say I'm very supportive of this. I don't have a lot more to add. I think everything's been said, but I think we're here because we need to provide transit service for the region. And I think what you see here is a partnership between the union and management in a way that I haven't seen for quite a while. And so I'm really pleased with this, and my desire is that we build on this partnership, on this agreement when it is ratified by the union, and look for other opportunities to partner up with our union for the benefit of the transit riders of the Portland metro region. So again, thanks to the union, thanks to the staff for a wonderful job, and I think we're ready to vote. All right? So I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 14-10-52, which is authorizing the general manager and the chief negotiator to enter into a new working and wage agreement with Division 757 of the Amalgamated Transit Union, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Again, congratulations to everybody. Thanks. Yeah, I agree. All right, the last item we have on our formal agenda is Resolution 14-10-53, which is approving intergovernmental agreements with the City of Portland and Clark County Public Transportation Benefit Area regarding the participation in the regional e-fare system. Mr. General Manager.
Board President, members of the board, another important milestone in our progress toward an electronic fare system. As you very well know, that at the outset of this, we envisioned this to be a regional program that provided ubiquitous electronic fare service throughout our metropolitan area, allowing customers of C-Tran or the streetcar to also have the benefit of those same fare mechanisms on the TriMet system and vice versa. So a great benefit to our riders, as we can see in terms of the region, if we have that sort of regional system in place. And while we designed it that way and worked very closely with these agencies as we begin the design, up to now we have not had a formal intergovernmental agreement related to their participation. We started with something called an MOU, which was really just sort of a roadmap to get to this point. And so we have now in front of you a consideration of two intergovernmental agreements, one with the City of Portland related to the streetcar service, and one with C-Tran related to their the interconnection of their bus service. Key elements of this include payments during the design and development phase, payments for the capital equipment, how that will be handled, and then the proportional split of expenses moving on in the operating phase. Each of them, as noted in your resolution, are a little bit different in terms of the framework. For example, C-Tran will purchase their own validators and capital equipment that go on their fleet, but then participate in the back end part of the system through with TriMet. The City of Portland related streetcar will actually have us do that. We will then actually finance that over a payment of 3 years for the city, so that again we do that as part of the procurement for our own system. And then again, primarily as we then move into operations, and again, the C-TRAN agreement has a couple phases so that there will be a second phase associated with actually activating that part of the agreement that will deal with the split of operating costs over time. And again, that's really intended to be primarily related to how many taps occur on each system. So again, a very, I think, fair way to allocate costs and revenues. Again, the notion is that TriMet is the lead associated with developing and managing this system, and that, again, the other agencies participate in the back end of that system primarily. The one thing that I did want to note, and Chris Tucker is here, can certainly answer any additional questions about these agreements for you, but the regional fair approach will require a little bit more coordination between regional agencies when it comes to fair policy. So one of the provisions of these agreements I just wanted to point out to you is that there's a 90-day provision related to major changes in fair policy once the system is in place. Frankly, I think 90 days is probably too short, but that's a minimum. And what we really need to do is work collaboratively with the agencies hand in hand over throughout the year as we consider any fair policy changes, so that, again, we try to make sure that we minimize confusion and have as much consistency in these systems between the agencies as is possible. So again, I think this is an important step toward that regional electronic fare system we've been planning. I would just also note that one of the other efforts is that we're looking toward wrapping up and beginning to really think hard about the branding of the electronic fare system and how we begin to roll that out, and a major communication program that we know is part of that. So we're beginning to engage on that front as well. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or any hard ones I'll lob to Chris Tucker.
Just the one about C-TRAN will provide their own equipment, and I'm going to assume, which is always dangerous, but Chris probably took care of it, that everything's going to work together. This system in Vancouver, we're talking, everything, same manufacturer, same everything. Okay, it's just a matter of who pays. Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
And I would note, we like that notion because we're going to have a big job just outfitting our own fleet. We're very happy to have C-TRAN take those responsibilities on for their own system.
Yep.
Excellent. Yes. Quick question. So, as we move to the EFR system, we already do some revenue share based on the systems being, integrated to some degree. Now, the specific breakdown that we're looking at here, how different is that? How different is this than currently what we're under in some of the revenue share?
That's a really good question. I'll lob that one to Mr. Tucker. But what I would say is, I think to some extent what we do right now is based on surveys that are done at irregular points, regular times, but not. And this will be much more exacting with that.
Good morning. Morning.
So currently, as it relates to C-TRAN, for example, there's really just a... Oh, Chris Tucker. Yes, thank you. Currently, the agreement with C-TRAN is really just sharing half of their all-zone revenue with TriMet. It's a very basic, very old agreement, and over time has remained in place. What this opportunity, and with Streetcar, there isn't an agreement per se. It's simply that if you buy a TriMet pass, you can use it on Streetcar. If you use a Streetcar machine to buy a pass that works on TriMet, they keep the revenue. So what this agreement does is it took a holistic step back and said, okay, if we were to do this the right way, to consider the most fair way of sharing revenue, what would we do? Basically what we came up with the help of Eco Northwest, is a very clear, concise way of calculating revenue sharing with each agency based on what the usage is. So it's much expanded to where we are today, and gets us to where we're confident that we've got a fair revenue sharing program.
Do we have any idea of what the percentage breakdown differences are, or do we? Understanding what you just said in your answer, what the percentage of breakdowns are today that we do the revenue share. It doesn't sound like we do anything with the streetcar.
Right.
But we do with C-Tran.
Right.
Is there any idea of what that percentage breakdown is?
I would be speculating if Claire were here, I would defer to her to give us maybe a quick answer, but I don't have that off the cuff, so I better not shoot from the hip.
So as I look at this doesn't include the agreement, but is there an opportunity at some point to review the revenue share that we're doing and ensure that the revenue and the cost are where they should be? Because that would be the primary concern. We already have some revenue share, but as we put something down that's more specific, more concise, and clear, then there becomes an opportunity to say, okay, wow, we're probably a couple of percentages off, which a couple of percentages when we're talking these kind of numbers could be significant.
Right.
We're happy to do that. I would just note, while we don't, related to streetcar, for example, actually share the revenue, that revenue calculation goes into your subsidy of the streetcar system overall, which is part of the regular budget. So that is taken into consideration when we set the amount of revenue that we pass off for streetcar operation. So it is one of the considerations that goes into that that funding formula.
So as we implement does it change some of that formula that we've historically used?
It will likely change it somewhat, although I would say that as we've thought about it historically, it's been based on survey, so there is some basis in current usage so my bet is that not going to change it a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Speculation though.
Good. How are we doing? Ready to promotion?
So moved.
I have a motion to approve the resolution 14-10-53. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. Oh. I think.
Second.
Okay, second, right here. All right, good. So further discussion on this item? Okay, then I'm going to call a question. All those in favor of the motion to approve resolution 14-10-53, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, that concludes our all over the things on our business agenda. Is there anything else to come before us this morning on our business agenda? Okay, then I'm going to adjourn the meeting for October 22nd. And we have one briefing item. How's the board doing? Does the board need to stretch or have a break? Should we keep?
Ready to go.
Brett, let's go. Is Mr. Lato here?
I dissent. No.
Yes.
I'll stick with the good doctor.
And he will come up and we'll start this briefing. But I just wanted to give you, Mr. Board President, members of the board, a sort of a quick introduction. You might remember that one of the recommendations of the Secretary of State's audit was to more publicly adopt service planning guidelines. And we have been giving that some attention about how that actually should happen. And so Alan will be going through a report that will sort of give you a status on where we are with the service planning efforts overall and how we're thinking about bringing those guidelines to you and what format they would come to you. I would tell you that this is an area that will continue to be refined. And one example, Board Member Zaragoza noted the work of the TIAC earlier, and one of their key topics is the equity lens. So how can we begin to integrate, for example, that new tool into the service planning guidelines over time? And my hope is that what we all have is a framework where you can establish some general policies, and then we can begin to refine our tools for how we measure those and guide our actual service decisions over time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alan.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Neil's set the stage very well here. What I want to do is just talk through some of this at the high level. And Board Member Zaragoza, you got the preview of some of the detail that we're working on that presumably, if whatever version of that comes through after public comment and TIAC and CAT and others might be the sort of detail that carries that forward. So just relatively briefly here, what we're anticipating to do is come to you in December with a kind of broad policy statement and a service planning guidelines framework that sets the policy direction for how we do decision-making around service planning. We've actually had a fairly consistent methodology. We're always improving our techniques and our data. But we haven't done what I would say is a great job of communicating that, and we haven't necessarily done a good job of understanding how the different considerations and pressures balance off against each other. And so this would be about setting direction and policy for service planning decisions around managing our service, around expanding our service when we're able to do, and around reducing service when we're forced to do so. And so that would sort of set the overall policy direction, identify the priority considerations that really, amongst many considerations, drive the service planning decisions. And then each year, as we've talked about before, we're doing an annual service plan that describes what the plan is for that year. And this service guidelines framework would define the direction, set the policy for us developing that annual service plan each year, where we are able to talk about, well, what are we doing to maintain the service? What are we doing to optimize and restore? And what are we doing, if possible, to increase service? As we've gone through the list of the many considerations that comes into play when we look at service planning issues, there are 5 that kind of bubble up to the top again and again. And so one of the elements of the statement that we would anticipate that you would see in December would be to identify these as sort of head and shoulders things to really pay attention to. And they're fairly simple when you think about them, but they do guide how we think about what data we look at and what we're paying attention to whenever we hear any kind of request or interest in additional service or changes in the kind of service that we have. So the first is obviously demand. We want to do what we can to provide service that helps address the demand throughout the region. Looking specifically then at productivity as one of the things that's a good way to measure how we're doing in terms of matching that service to demand. So the way we typically measure that is boarding rides per vehicle hour, to make sure that we're being as productive as we can with the resources that we have while recognizing the need to provide service to the entire district. Connections. So these are over and above just the simple demand, thinking about those key places. And you can think about that as grocery stores or hospitals or job centers or training centers, key places in communities that really need connections. And those are things that we need to pay attention to sort of over and above the basic demand of a corridor of an area. Equity, obviously, always something that we're paying attention to, striving to make sure that we're taking into account the needs of low-income residents, people of color, those who do not necessarily have the voice that we wish they would have in asking for what they need. So we're needing to pay very close attention to that. And then growth, and this covers both the obvious population growth, employment growth, as well as what comes along with that, which is growth in traffic, growth in congestion. So this is where that piece of the kind of basic maintenance of the service comes in. And there are many other factors, and the obvious ones include safety. They include sort of how a transit route can best serve people's needs, the many kinds of interests and needs that people have. But these are the ones that we're really kind of looking at in terms of, those are the ones that help drive service planning decisions. And so the question before you will be, to keep this short in December, is this kind of the right approach? And are these the right priority guidelines? Are these the right guidelines? Are these the right priority considerations? And so what we would do then, given that kind of high-level direction, is develop further the draft that you already saw, Board Member Saragosa, and then build on that over time, as Neil mentioned, to look at additional things like how do we incorporate an equity tool that's still under development, so we can't quite say how we're going to use it, but how do we incorporate that into our annual service planning? How do we incorporate the analysis of, the effectiveness of our service today and the recent changes that we've made and how well things have responded to that? So the next steps would really be about sort of pulling the policy document together, and then using that, if that is the direction you choose to give us, using that to finalize kind of this first phase of a document that shares what our process is, what our key considerations are, and how we look at things, and set the stage for a process over the next couple of years to refine that and dig deeper and do more data analysis and understanding what kinds of tools, including the equity tool, we should be using and can productively use in making those service planning decisions. And with that, I will keep it short.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go first.
No, doctor, go first.
Okay. I want to go back to the priority considerations and the one about equity. We all seem to sometimes have a different working definition of what equity is. I would like to ask the committee to, for that part, to come up with some type of working definition or set of goals of objectives that we're trying to work towards. That gives us something to measure when we start talking about, is this equitable, or what equity is in terms of these policies. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I think the hope and the intention of TEAC is that that equity tool that we mentioned will start to get at that. Whether it's the complete encapsulation of that, that's a separate question that we'll continue to work on.
Okay.
If I can add, yes, there's been discussion around that, and to really get what's that definition and working toward the definition. So as part of the training with Ms. Balaji, it's really looking at to have a framework that we all understand that we can use to measure the work that we're going forward with.
Thank you very much.
I had something.
Please.
Go ahead, Ed.
I think it's you.
These are all great points. I don't, this isn't, how do you meet all these goals when you have the growth of people and cars? And everybody's going to blame TriMet because we're not on schedule, but yeah, this is going on. I mean, have we ever talked to like the state about put a high-speed line going south out of Portland, just for instance, on the freeway? You know, the commuter lane.
Oh, like an HOV lane with buses in it or something like that.
Yeah, that's the acronym. I knew there was an acronym.
There's always an acronym.
Yeah.
Not specifically about that, though. As you probably know, there is that HOV lane to the north that C-Tran is able to use. We are in pretty constant conversation with ODOT and the cities about what we can do on the arterials that we are serving to be able to reduce delay. In fact, I was just looking at an email today that the city last week put in a queue jump for us at a particular intersection, and we're going to do the before and after study to see how that does. And as those are successful, we hope to get more traction with being able to do those in more places. And for projects such as the Powell Division line, we would be looking at stringing together a whole bunch of those to really be able to get a lot of effectiveness out of that.
But you were restricted.
What's that?
We're restricted because of, the density.
There are a lot of competing needs for every
very
square foot out there.
Needs, right.
And that's why, there are a lot of competing needs in every case. If I could do what everybody asked, we absolutely would. There's no way we could ever afford to do that. And that's why this is characterized as considerations rather than, key criteria, because we have to balance so many things.
Which leads me to, we had a presentation at the retreat about putting at the stations for development, where people could live there and shop and everything else. And we were talking about maybe getting land around perhaps that area. I just noticed out in my district, off of Barber, they knocked down probably 1.5 acre size lot with a bank on it. It used to be a bank, and it's right next to Barber. Duh. And I wonder if that's the stuff, that's things that we could be looking at.
Well,
so we don't have to, as an agency, let's see. was my four-letter word. Anyway, no, so we can have a reasonable,
So I think
expense.
the important thing related to your question, Board Member Esmond, is our partnership with our local jurisdictions. So, we don't control the land uses, but the cities and the counties that we operate in do. And I would tell you that we have a very strong partnership with those, certainly in the city of Portland. And if you begin to look at as the presentation of the retreat began to show, is that the marketplace of housing development is definitely responding to those areas around transit. So that's been very rewarding to see, because frankly that's work, though, when you start talking about changing the land use pattern of a region, you're talking about a very long time scale. But we're beginning to see the results of a lot of zoning and other sorts of changes that really have been occurring over the last 30 years in various parts of the region.
So that they figure another 7,000 units in the next 2 years in Portland? Apartment units or condos? How is, this is rhetorical, how can we ever keep up with that and plan for that?
Well, and I would tell you,
Have happy customers.
these forecasts that you're seeing, and these numbers aren't exact, so don't quote me precisely, and they would change every year based on payroll tax and payer revenue and all that sort of, but do indicate that there would be about 1.5% growth in service every year. Most of that would be related to improving the headways on existing lines that are showing that they're overcrowded. And, a perfect example that we're struggling with right now is the number 4 line on Southeast Division, but also in North Portland, because there's an enormous amount of housing development and there's enormous growth in ridership that's associated with that. And it is one of those things as well that the more service we put out, the more demand we generate, because it's easier to use and becomes, even more convenient. So there are clearly challenges associated with what I would call success in terms of attracting transit ridership. But again, our forecasts do indicate that there's a lion's share of that 1.5% really has to go to that, frankly, maintain category over time.
And of course, the good news, as many of you saw at the board retreat from Lorelei Juntunen from Eco Northwest, she showed a map of multifamily housing development that has happened over the past 5 years, and almost all of it is on our MAX lines and frequent service lines. So keeping up with those services is easier than chasing them all around the region, which is better for walkability, bikeability, people on transit, less total congestion despite all these people moving to the region as a whole.
I guess I'd just say, having been involved in some of this stuff in the past, that it is a system that's got to work together. And, I come in on the Sunset Highway in the transit or in my car, and, I look at the amount of cars on the Sunset Highway in the morning. It's well over 90%, I would think, single occupant vehicles. Mm-hmm. And so I think price of gas, I think congestion, there's a whole lot of things that are going to occur in the next few years, I think, that are going to require us to look at things such as HOV lanes, such as HOT lanes, hot lanes, high occupancy tolling lanes. There's going to be smart technology brought into the picture. But I just look at what we could do if we could just get 20% of those people to drive with one more person in those, what amount of capacity could be brought into those highways. And so I think, we're getting to the point where we've got to really start looking at those. And I think there's a number of things that will occur in the future that'll allow us more to do that. But it's not without a great deal of public opposition and consternation. So taking away a lane and making it an HOV lane is very hard to do. Adding a new lane and making it an HOV lane, maybe. That's still hard. That's a hard sell. But I think that's changing. I think we'll see that more in the future. So you're right on, Director Esmond, in terms of things we need to look at in the future. And that's why we're part of the dialogue that's going on in the region here in the state. And the system will look different in the future in a big way, in my opinion. If it doesn't, it'll be, congestion everywhere. So. Yep.
One quick comment just to piggyback on what you just said. I think technology is really going to play a key role in the future. One of the things that, I now do that helps, kind of move my decision around about how I'm going to travel throughout the region is when I get up in the morning, I've got a destination. I break out, Google Maps and take my first look at what does traffic look like, and then I run it on my transit app and I compare the two. I said that, many times actually these days, I can get where I'm going faster if I take transit, because I'm traveling primarily during the rush hours, both in the morning and the afternoon. And I think Google is actually doing more technology in Microsoft Maps and all the mapping programs to combine the two to gives you actually the different options. And I think as an agency, we can, and not just us, but all transit agencies could do more work in that regard to encourage that type of adoption of technology that gives you and shows you side-by-side option. When you do that, you say, okay, well, you can actually drive there, or you could, take transit, or you could get there faster by taking your bicycle sometimes. And having those different options, I think, is a critical component as we look at technology. And we talk about service guidelines and all of these things when we talk about demand and connections and growth.
Yeah, because they're not going to be putting manufacturing facilities in downtown Portland. So the people to go to work will be working in office buildings. And I just wanted to say, Dr. Bethel is right. The Boston transportation system was wonderful. I just spent a week there. And what I liked was they go up and down out of the ground. And that's something maybe, of course, it's always more expensive, but, and it's an old system. But it's still working. Huh?
The nation's oldest, actually.
That's right. So we will look forward to this dialogue and discussion in December. Is that right? Okay. As you can see, this will be a robust discussion on part of the board. So thank you. We welcome that discussion.
And it'll be your fault.
I think with that, we're going to declare victory for the day and allow everybody to celebrate the approval of contract. Thanks again.
Thank you.